It was a quiet evening in the small town of Mill Creek, a place where everyone knew each other, and nothing much ever happened. Yet for weeks, strange occurrences had begun to unsettle the town's residents. The woods that bordered Mill Creek had become a source of terror. The first incident was simple. A local farmer named Tom had heard footsteps trailing him as he walked home one evening. When he turned around, no one was there. But as he continued down the path, the footsteps grew louder, and the air around him seemed to thicken. At first, Tom thought it was just his imagination, but when he arrived home, his dog was shaking uncontrollably, staring at the door with eyes wide in fear. That night, Tom couldn't sleep, as the unease crept into every corner of his house. The next incident involved a group of teenagers, curious and bold, deciding to venture into the woods after dark. They'd heard rumors, but thought them to be exaggerated. But what they found that night, they couldn't explain. The camera flashes on the night the group entered the woods, their flashlights cutting through the dense fog. As they ventured deeper, one of the teens, Sarah, noticed something moving just beyond the reach of their lights. It was a figure, pale, thin, and tall. She blinked, and it was gone. Sarah spoke up, but the others dismissed it as a trick of the light. But as they walked on, the sensation of being watched grew unbearable. Suddenly, a loud rustling broke the silence, and the group turned to see a dark shape darting through the trees, just out of sight. Without thinking, they turned and fled, running back toward the edge of the woods. But when they reached the clearing, the figure was waiting for them. Standing motionless, his eyes reflected the faint light of their flashlights, and his smile, if you could call it that, was wide and unnatural. They ran, faster than they'd ever run before. The next day, the woods were silent again. But the stories continued. A local police officer, Joe Matthews, decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, a notepad, and a sense of duty, Officer Matthews ventured into the woods alone. He believed the stories were just that, stories. As he walked deeper, he noticed the trees were thicker here. The air grew heavy. His flashlight flickered, and then he saw something. A shape. A tall, thin figure standing perfectly still between the trees, its eyes locked onto him. Officer Matthews froze, his heart pounding. It started to step toward him, jerky and unnaturally slow. Matthews took a step back, gripping his radio. But just as he tried to speak, it vanished. Officer Matthews bolted out of the woods. He never spoke of what he saw, but the fear in his eyes was enough to make the townspeople believe. No one ever entered the woods again, and slowly, the town of Mill Creek went quiet. But at night, when the wind howls, the whispers can still be heard, the whispers of a figure forever watching from the shadows. Years passed, and the events surrounding the Watcher in the Woods faded into the realm of forgotten legend. The town of Mill Creek began to move on, rebuilding its quiet, peaceful life. But there was an underlying unease that never quite went away. People still avoided the woods, and whenever someone new came to town, they would be warned. Not just about the forest, but about the things that lived inside it. Then, one cold autumn night, a family moved into the old farmhouse at the edge of town. The Harrisons were new to Mill Creek, seeking a fresh start. They were unaware of the dark history. Mark, the father, didn't believe in ghost stories, and Emily was eager to leave behind the chaos of city life. They had 2 children, Jack, their adventurous 13-year-old, and Lily, a quiet 10-year-old with an unusual sensitivity to things others couldn't see. The first few days were filled with the usual settling-in tasks, unpacking boxes, cleaning old corners, and getting used to the creaks of a house empty for so long. But it wasn't long before strange things began to happen. Unexplained noises, items mysteriously misplaced, shadows flickering just out of sight. Emily dismissed them, but Jack felt the presence of something watching him, especially when he explored the woods. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but the feeling grew stronger each day. It wasn't just the trees that watched him. It was something much worse. One evening, Jack came home breathless. He had been walking near the edge of the woods when he thought he saw a figure in the distance, standing perfectly still. He tried to shake it off, but his stomach told him it wasn't a trick. As he turned to head home, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate. He spun around, heart pounding, but the woods were empty. No figure, no sound, just the dead silence that only the forest could hold. The next day, Lily began to have nightmares. She woke up screaming, sweat-soaked, eyes wide with terror. She whispered about the Watcher, an old man with pale, ghostly eyes who stood in the corner of her room, tall, thin, with a twisted smile. Emily thought it was a dream, but Jack knew better. That night, when Mark was away, Jack decided to confront whatever was haunting them. Armed with a flashlight and his fear, he ventured into the woods. The moonlight barely pierced the thick canopy. He walked deeper, hairs on his neck standing up. He couldn't escape the dread that gnawed at him. The feeling of being watched became overwhelming. He stopped. His flashlight caught something. There, barely visible, was a figure, standing motionless. His face was obscured by darkness, but Jack knew instantly who it was. The Watcher. Jack's heart hammered, backing away slowly. The figure didn't move. Jack could feel the pull, the cold grip of something ancient, luring him into the heart of the woods. Suddenly, a shrill, high-pitched scream echoed through the trees. It was Lily. Jack turned to run back toward the house. When he glanced behind him, the Watcher was gone. He didn't stop running until he was safe inside. The next morning, Emily found Jack huddled in his room, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. He told her everything about the Watcher, the footsteps in the woods, and the figure that had been watching him. Emily was skeptical, but the fear in Jack's eyes was too real to ignore. That night, as the family sat in the living room, they heard a faint scratching noise coming from the walls. Lily, who had been quiet for days, suddenly spoke up. "He's here! The Watcher is in the house!" At first, Emily thought it was just another nightmare, but then the scratching grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from the attic. Mark, now concerned, grabbed a flashlight and climbed up to investigate. As he opened the attic door, the temperature seemed to drop, and the air grew thick with a sense of dread. The flashlight beam danced across the dark attic, revealing nothing. But as Mark stepped inside, something caught his eye. A strange symbol carved into the wooden beams. It was the same symbol that had been found in the woods years ago, and it was still fresh, like it had been recently scratched into the wood. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He backed out of the attic, slamming the door behind him. The scratching stopped immediately. That night, as the family huddled together, trying to make sense of everything, a heavy silence filled the air. They didn't hear the whispers anymore, but they felt them, like a presence hovering just beyond their reach. And then, at the stroke of midnight, the doorbell rang. Mark and Emily froze. The doorbell rang again, louder this time. Cautiously, Mark walked to the door and opened it. No one was there, just the wind howling through the empty streets. But something caught his eye. A small, crumpled piece of paper lying on the doorstep. He picked it up and unfolded it, revealing a single, chilling message written in red ink. "I'm watching you." Days passed, and the events grew more intense. The Watcher had returned to the woods, to the house, and now it had made its mark on the family. The strange occurrences were no longer isolated. They were happening more frequently, more violently. No one was safe. In a final desperate attempt to break the curse, Emily sought the help of a local historian. The historian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Blackwell, had lived in Mill Creek for decades and knew the stories of the Watcher all too well. She explained that the Watcher was not merely a ghost, but a spirit bound to the land, a dark entity that had existed for centuries, preying on the souls of anyone who dared to cross its path. "He comes when the land is disturbed," Mrs. Blackwell explained, "and once he marks you, there is no escaping him." Emily begged her for a way to stop the Watcher, but Mrs. Blackwell's answer was simple. "You can't. You can only wait until it's your time." That night, the Watcher came for the Harrisons. It moved silently, with a presence so overwhelming that it seemed to distort time and space. Mark, Emily, Jack, and Lily, though terrified, knew they had no choice but to face what they had unleashed. But when the Watcher appeared, they didn't run. They stood face to face with the darkness that had haunted Mill Creek for centuries. The Watcher's eyes gleamed, hollow and cold, as it stepped closer. And then, as if recognizing their acceptance of their fate, it spoke. "Welcome to the end."